Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos, and in today's video we've got a little bit of a two-part video. So first we're going to talk about the new myth track changes in War Within, and gearing and stuff, crafting, those kind of things. And then there's also some affix changes that'll be in the second half of this video. I'll try and remember to put some chapters or whatever down at the bottom so you can navigate to that if that's all you want to see. But up first we're going to talk about the myth track, which now had this tweet and Tettles had a video about earlier as well. And the basic idea of this is that right now, the myth track goes up 4 slots, right? There's myth 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4, 4 out of 4. In War Within, it's going to go up to 6. So myth will go all the way up 6 steps. Hero will also stay where it is relatively too. So effectively, myth track has gotten sort of buffed in terms of how high it goes relative to hero track, and also relative to crafted gear. But it does mean that there's going to be much more weeks of needing aspect crests, or whatever the new name is for it, to actually fully realize all the potential of any myth track gear that you get. It also means that now myth track gear is 13 eye levels better than hero track gear instead of 6, and it's 10 eye levels better than crafted gear instead of 3. So that is a big deal. So there are a couple different implications for this. First of all, if you were somebody who had access to myth track gear early in the patch, you can get it from M+ from your vault, but they did nerf the level that you have to do. You have to basically do 9s or 10s in War Within to get myth track gear, and I think it'll only be myth 1 out of 6 from your vault, unlike in Dragonflight where you could get up to myth 2 out of 4. So instead of needing 2 steps for each piece of gear you get from your vault to upgrade, you're going to need 5 to go from 1 to 6 instead of from 2 to 4. So you're going to need more than double the amount of crests to fully upgrade all of your gear across your whole character if all the myth track gear you're getting is from your vault, is from those myth 1 out of 6 sources. Now, there are still myth 2 out of 6, 3 out of 6, 4 out of 6 sources from the raid if you can do the raid and you can kill the later bosses there. But if you can't do that, and if you're relying on just gearing your character up from M+, that time horizon has definitely gotten quite a lot longer. And if you're a raid player, it's also gotten longer because, myth 4 out of 6 versus 4 out of 4 is still extra upgrading that you're going to have to do. So all characters are going to be spending more time getting geared, and are going to hit their ceiling later, if at all, right? Obviously, there are a whole lot of players that never hit fully upgraded across their gear. And if you did get myth track gear on your character, that is going to be even more far in the future. If you're somebody who never had access to myth track gear, this is sort of a relative nerf to you because you are, further item levels below myth track. Myth track going to a higher item level does nerf you a little bit. Although it is worth noting that if you are somebody who only does M+ and you're relying on getting all your myth track gear out of M+, I don't think it's right to think about this as that big of a nerf because realistically, the raid players are going to be also still upgrading for so long, right? Like it's like, yeah, it's going to take you, weeks and weeks of vaults before you've got myth track in all your slots. But it's also going to take the raid players longer to fully upgrade all their stuff. So raid players will still be done upgrading before M+ players. They'll be done getting myth track in every slot before M+ players. And some of those myth track slots that they get will be myth 2, myth 3, myth 4. But they will, at least, if you are a Mythic Plus only player, and you don't get turbo unlucky, and you hopefully you find a myth track weapon in one of the first few weeks, that's obviously like a really big deal. Then it's not going to be that, like, it's a nerf compared to the raid players. Well, I should say compared to the players that raid and do M+. That's always the comparison here, because if you were only raiding, it would also be bad. You'd be missing a lot of crests and stuff as well. But either way, that's one ramification of this change. The other ramification here is that the crafted items are going to suck. Crafted items, if you have access to myth track gear, crafted items now being 10 item levels below that it's going to feel really bad, especially if it's still correct to wear 2 embellishments. You're going to want to wear your embellishments. Like, it's already true that you want to put your embellishments on bracers and belt and stuff, these low stat budget slots, because it's a lower loss, because it's, in Dragonflight or whatever, those are 525 and it's 528 in the other slots, and you'd rather have 528 in the higher stat budget slots because that gives you more power. But when that is effectively 528 versus 518, or I guess 535 versus 525 would be a more accurate comparison to our current item level, that is going to feel way worse and might still be worth, I don't know, embellishments may or may not be worth actually still including in a full BIS loadout. They're slightly weaker than they are in Dragonflight as well, so I'm not 100% sure. But either way, that strikes me as a something that shouldn't be that way. Like, that it feels icky. So what are my takes on this overall? I think for main character gearing, this is probably okay. I do think that M plus only players are fair in being somewhat upset about this. I think that one thing that they could do, so I don't know, pivoting out of complaining mode to, there are a couple of things that I think they could do to make this go down a little bit easier. First of all, I think they should buff the crafted items. Crafted items shouldn't be that far below the fully upgraded stuff. I think that would be good. Second of all, I think that, so Now's point in this tweet is basically like, look, this has doubled the amount of runs that it's going to take me to fully gear a character with all the crests that I'm going to need to upgrade. And I think that's a fair criticism as well. Particularly like if you're imagining it's like November, you roll up a fresh alt, you know, the crest cap or whatever is effectively irrelevant at this point, but you just are looking at it and you're like, wow, I need to farm 1,000 aspect crests, right, so that I can fully upgrade all my gear. Like, that is a daunting prospect at 12 crests per timed key. So I think that a few things they should consider doing are, they should make it, first of all, this is the one that I think is least negotiable, and they should do yesterday. They should have done this a long time ago. You shouldn't lose crests when you deplete a key. Or if you do, it shouldn't be anywhere close to as harsh as going from 12 to 5. That, to me, seems really, really bad. It encourages you to just do keys at the level that you know you can always time, rather than doing the more fun keys at a slightly riskier level where you might deplete them. If you deplete a key, it's already, by definition, taking you longer anyways. So your crests per hour are already worse, but going from 12 to 5 is just so brutal that I think that is really unfortunate, and they should very much rethink that. So that one, that's kind of agnostic to all the other complaints here. That one they should just do, whether or not you agree with me on any of this other stuff. I think that's the one I feel most sure about. The other stuff I think they should consider speeding up crest gain later in the patch. There are a couple different ways you could do this. You could just, like, every week, you could just start adding an extra crest to each raid boss and to each key that you do. So, you know, for the first month or whatever, sure, it can be 12 crests per key, and then 13 on November 1st, and 14 on November 8th, and 15 per key on November 15th or whatever. You do that, all of a sudden the amount of runs needed starts dropping down as players are considering making alts later in the patch, or playing an alt later in the patch. I think that could go, or you could instead gate that behind some warband achievements. You know, if it's like, hey, if you get one character to item level 635 or whatever, then you unlock account-wide faster crest gain. Something like that, I think, could be another way of implementing that. Or maybe it's like, you know that achievement where it's like, hey, you've outgrown Drake's crests. Now any Drake's crests on your other characters are doubled or times 150% or whatever. And same for worms and aspects, which again, those crests are changing name in War Within, but I'm going to keep using those until they come out, because that's what everybody's familiar with. Yeah, and then the other thing I think they should maybe consider is, I think that getting Mythtrack end of dungeon later in the patch should also maybe be an option. This expansion comes with a new feature where basically 12 and higher keys have like a giga difficulty affix, but then they lose the affixes that change week to week. And I think it could make sense if, say, again, starting in October or November or something, so that it doesn't impact the early game gear grind, and make this like a dominating strategy for gearing up characters early in the patch. Making it so that 12 or higher keys drop Mythtrack gear end of dungeon, starting, again, some point midway through the patch, could go a long way towards making this not feel so daunting for M+ers, and also mitigate some of that where it's like, hey, I haven't seen a weapon from my Great Vault at all for, if you don't see a weapon from your Great Vault for the first 6 Great Vaults you open, at least starting on the 7th week, that you can farm it yourself if you can do those really hard keys, which, again, Mythtrack is, like, I think Mythtrack getting buffed isn't inherently bad. It's, you get it from really hard content. They're making it so that you have to do the harder content in M+, like harder than Dragonflight to get it. You have to do Mythic Raid if you want to get it from Raid as well. I think that's fair. I think, Mythtrack being an incentive to go and do that really hard content does make some sense, but I think given that it's that much better than Hero Track, maybe making it a little bit more obtainable for M plusers would be good. It would also help kind of even out. Like, I'm just imagining that, you know, what classes it's kind of easy to roll up is going to be, if you tell me like, hey, you're going to roll up a class that has a good weapon and a good trinket from the first 2 bosses of the raid that you can pug on Mythic versus the last 2 bosses on the raid that you can't. That sort of thing being a variable that decides what class you roll up as an alt has always been a big thing that I hate whenever that's a consideration, which has in the past sometimes been a thing. So those are my thoughts on the myth track change and the crafters item change and stuff like that. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But let's move on to the second part of this video, which is we've got some M plus affix changes coming in this week's beta build. So continuing the theme of Xal'atath's Bargain, there's a new affix to beta this week, Xal'atath's Bargain Oblivion. While in combat, Xal'atath manifests crystals from the void that can be absorbed by enemies or players. They spawn near enemies, move towards them until they're absorbed by players or collide with the enemy. Players that absorb these void crystals gain increased mastery and leech. Sweet. It doesn't actually say what happens when they hit the enemies. It doesn't say if they like explode or give the enemies mastery would be weird, but leech or damage or a shield or something. I assume it'll do something like that. But this seems like a pretty cool little affix, you know. Movement based, right? Not something that is inherently going to cause you problems. You know, you don't have to do any extra damage. You just have to do some extra movement to soak these things. Seems like a really pretty fun affix. Mastery and leech also pretty fun stats. Getting some leech on some hard pulls could actually be really sweet for some of these pulls in some of the dungeons and some bosses as well. So I think this is a really cool affix. They're also nerfing Voidbound, which is really good. This affix was, I think, a little bit of an outlier in terms of how difficult and annoying it was, and they're nerfing both its difficulty and its annoyingness here. So Void Emissaries now follow the tank player after being summoned. Great. Their health has been adjusted, and its health no longer scales with Fortified. Double great, as long as adjusted here means nerfed and not buffed. Dark Prayer now grants 5% damage to all enemies in combat every 2 seconds, adjusted from 10% every 3 seconds. So this is 50% less, although it will start ramping, I guess, a little bit faster. But still, that is nice, right? 5 every 2, down from 10 every 3, right? So this is 10 every 4, I guess, instead of 10 every 3, so it's a third less. Dark Prayer now persists if the channel finishes without the Void Emissary being defeated, so you definitely need to kill the Void Emissary. But Blessing from Beyond now grants cooldown reduction in addition to crit chance. Again, cooldown reduction is an inherently fun stat. This is something that will make this affix more fun to play with, and I think that is cool. I think this is sweet. So this new affix looks cool. Obviously, not having played it, beta isn't up right now. And Voidbound also, I think, is being moved in a good direction from being an affix that was kind of reminiscent to some of the annoyingness of other older affixes that have gotten taken away. I think they're nerfing it in a very good way here, and adding the cooldown reduction here, I think, is phenomenal. So, M+, I don't know, it looks like it's going to be fun. The new Xal'atath affixes seem sweet. They have been kind of sweet to play with. You can still get owned on them, on some of them, like the one with all the orbs, if you just don't have an AoE CC up for it. That can be bad. But I think that they're in a really good place already, compared to all previous M+ affixes. So I think M+ is pretty exciting from that perspective. I will say the 15-second death penalty thing instead of 5 seconds, kind of a bummer. That one, I feel like deaths are already very punishing, and punishing them more, I'm not sure is the right move. And then also, of course, the myth track, hero track stuff that we talked about in the start of this video is very relevant for M+. So again, let me know what you think of all this. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.